The undergrounder suit leads Ethan to a hidden chamber beneath the town. There he encounters Eleanor Graves, the woman from the photograph. Instead of being an enemy, she reveals that she has spent years protecting Blackwood's secret. Eleanor explains that the hidden room was designed to safeguard documents proving that several prominent historical figures manipulated events to seize land and wealth from local families. Blackwood gathered evidence but disappeared before exposing the truth. For years, unknown individuals searched for the missing records. Eleanor became the latest guardian after inheriting Blackwood's final instructions from her grandfather. Together, Ethan and Eleanor follow the last clues hidden within the journals. Their search leads them toward a sealed vault deep beneath the tunnels. However, they soon realize others have followed them underground. The outline ends when the ancient vault door finally opens, revealing shelves filled with documents, and a single envelope addressed directly to Ethan Carter. Outline 5. The legacy hidden in the walls. Shocked by the envelope, Ethan discovers that his family has a forgotten connection to Jonathan Blackwood. His great-grandfather had secretly helped protect the evidence before it vanished from public knowledge. Inside the vault are records capable of correcting generations of injustice and restoring lost histories to many families in Ashcroft. However, powerful individuals still want the documents hidden forever. Ethan and Eleanor must decide whether revealing the truth is worth the risks. Facing pressure, threats, and growing uncertainty, they ultimately choose transparency. The evidence is released, transforming the town's understanding of its past. Long-buried stories come to light, and families finally receive recognition for what was taken from them. Months later, the mansion is restored to its former beauty. The hidden room remains intact, preserved as a reminder that truth can survive even when buried behind walls for generations. The story concludes with Ethan standing in the one secret room, realizing that the house he bought for $100 did far more than give him a home. It gave him a purpose, a community, and a legacy worth protecting. Start the first outline of the story, and I will write part 1 as a complete story section of at least 700 words. Start the first outline of the story. Part 1. The house nobody wanted. The rain had been falling since dawn, turning the narrow streets of Ashcroft into ribbons of gray. Ethan Carter sat alone in his small apartment, staring at a stack of unpaid bills spread across his kitchen table. The room was silent, except for the ticking of an old wall clock and the occasional tap of raindrops against the window. At 32, Ethan had imagined a very different life for himself. A few years earlier, he had worked for a respected architectural firm in the city. He had dreams of designing buildings that would stand for generations. But a series of unfortunate setbacks, economic troubles, company layoffs, and family hardships had slowly pulled those dreams apart. Now he worked freelance jobs whenever he'd find them, drawing floor plans and making building sketches for small contractors. The work paid enough to survive, but not enough to move forward. That morning, while searching through county property listings online, Ethan came across something that made him sit upright. County auction property, opening bid, $100. He blinked. Then he read it again. $100. Properties rarely sold for such a small amount unless something was seriously wrong. Curiosity got the better of him. He clicked the listing. A faded photograph appeared on the screen. The house was enormous. Though weathered by time, the old Victorian mansion still possessed an undeniable beauty. Its steep roof lines rose toward the sky, while elegant towers and decorative woodwork hinted at a grand past. The address placed it on the edge of Ashcroft. The description was surprisingly brief. Property sold as is. Buyer assumes responsibility for all repairs. Historical structure. No warranties provided. That was all. No photographs of the interior. No explanation. Nothing. The more Ethan looked at the image, the more fascinated he became. By afternoon, he found himself driving toward the property. The mansion stood alone at the end of a winding road lined with towering oak trees. Their branches swayed gently in the wind, casting moving shadows across the grounds. As Ethan stepped from his car, he stared at the house. Even in its neglected state, it was magnificent. Broken shutters hung crookedly from several windows. Vines crawled up sections of the exterior walls. Parts of the roof clearly needed repair. Yet beneath the decay remained traces of remarkable craftsmanship. Someone had once poured their heart into this place. Ethan slowly walked around the property. The front porch creaked beneath his feet. Tall windows reflected the cloudy sky. Everywhere he looked, he saw possibilities. Most people saw an abandoned ruin. He saw potential. The following day, Ethan attended the county auction. The room contained only a handful of people. When the property appeared on the agenda, something strange happened. Nobody bid, not even once. Several attendees exchanged uncomfortable glances. One elderly man actually shook his head and looked away. Finally, Ethan raised his hand. "I'll take it." The auctioneer looked almost relieved. "Sold." Just like that, Ethan became the owner of the old mansion for $100. As he completed the paperwork, a gray-haired clerk handed him a ring of keys. "You really bought that place?" she asked. Ethan smiled. "I guess I did." The woman hesitated. "Most folks around here avoid it." "Why?" She lowered her voice. "Stories." Ethan chuckled. "What kind of stories?" The clerk glanced toward the window. "The kind people don't like talking about." Before Ethan could ask more, she excused herself and returned to work. The conversation lingered in his mind, but he wasn't someone who believed rumors. Old houses always attracted stories, especially ones that had stood empty for years. A week later, Ethan moved into the mansion. The first day was spent cleaning. Dust covered nearly everything. Sheets draped over forgotten furniture, like silent ghosts. Entire rooms appeared untouched for decades. As sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, countless dust particles floated through the air. The house felt frozen in time. Each room seemed to hold echoes of another era. The dining hall featured an enormous chandelier. The library contained shelves stretching from floor to ceiling. Several bedrooms still held antique furniture. Though worn by age, the mansion retained an unusual sense of dignity. That evening, Ethan sat alone in the library with a flashlight and notebook. Rain tapped softly against the windows. The house occasionally creaked and groaned as old structures often did. Despite the sounds, he felt surprisingly comfortable. For the first time in years, he believed his life might be moving in a better direction. Over the next several days, Ethan focused on documenting the building. As an architectural draftsman, he enjoyed studying older structures. He measured hallways, recorded room dimensions, sketched floor layouts, examined construction details. The deeper he explored, the more questions emerged. One afternoon, while comparing his measurements to official property records obtained from a county office, he frowned. Something didn't make sense. He checked the numbers again. Then again. The mansion's exterior dimensions were larger than the combined measurements of its interior rooms. Not by much, but enough. A narrow discrepancy existed somewhere inside the structure. Unused space. Hidden space. At first, Ethan assumed he had made a measuring error. Yet repeated calculations produced the same result. There was a section of the house that should exist, but didn't. That night, he spread blueprints across a large table. Hours passed. The mystery continued bothering him. According to plans, every room should fit neatly within the building's footprint. Instead, several walls appeared unusually thick. One upstairs corridor seemed especially suspicious. Near midnight, Ethan grabbed a flashlight and climbed the staircase. The hallway stretched silently before him. Portraits of long-forgotten owners lined the walls. Their painted eyes seemed to follow him through the darkness. He examined every measurement carefully. One wall concealed nearly 6 feet of unaccounted space. 6 feet. Enough room for something significant. A hidden closet, perhaps. A storage area. Or something else entirely. As he moved closer, he noticed something unexpected. A faint current of cold air brushed against his face. He stopped. The hallway windows were closed. Yet the draft persisted. Slowly, Ethan traced its source. The airflow seemed to emerge from behind a large wooden bookshelf built directly into the wall. His pulse quickened. The bookshelf appeared original to the house. Heavy, solid, permanent, or at least it appeared that way. He ran his fingers along its edges. Nothing unusual. Then he pushed gently against one side. Nothing happened. He pushed harder. Still nothing. Feeling slightly foolish, He examined the shelves more closely. His flashlight revealed tiny scratches near one corner, marks that suggested movement. Someone had used this before, a long time ago. Holding his breath, Ethan pressed against the same spot again. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, click, a faint metallic sound echoed from somewhere deep inside the wall. Ethan immediately froze. The sound had been unmistakable. A mechanism hidden behind the bookshelf. And for the first time since purchasing the mansion, he realized that the stories surrounding the house might not have been stories at all. They might have been clues. Standing alone in the silent hallway, staring at the bookshelf, Ethan felt a mixture of excitement and unease. Whatever lay behind that wall had remained hidden for decades, perhaps even longer. And now, after years of silence, something had finally awakened. For several seconds after hearing the metallic click, Ethan Carter remained perfectly still. The old hallway was silent. No footsteps, no voices, nothing. Only the distant sound of rain striking the roof far above. His flashlight trembled slightly in his hand. The hidden mechanism had responded. That much was certain. The question was what happened next. Slowly, he pushed against the bookshelf again. At first, nothing moved. Then a low, grinding sound echoed through the wall. Dust drifted from the ceiling. The bookshelf shuddered. Ethan instinctively stepped backward. With surprising smoothness, the massive structure slid several feet to the side. A dark opening appeared behind it. Cold air flowed from the darkness like a breath released after decades of silence. Ethan stared at the passage. His heart pounded. As an architectural draftsman, he knew hidden spaces occasionally existed in old buildings. But finding one himself was something entirely different, especially one that had never appeared on any official plans. The narrow passage stretched into darkness. Stone walls lined both sides. The floor consisted of worn wooden planks covered in a thin layer of dust. Taking a deep breath, Ethan raised his flashlight and stepped inside. The air felt cooler immediately. His footsteps echoed softly. Behind him, the hallway disappeared from view. Ahead, the passage continued for nearly 20 feet before ending at what appeared to be another door. Unlike the rest of the mansion, this door looked remarkably well preserved. Its dark wood gleamed faintly beneath layers of age. Intricate carvings covered its surface. Symbols and patterns Ethan didn't recognize. He reached for the handle. For a moment he hesitated. Every instinct told him he was crossing a threshold that would change something. Then he turned the handle. The door opened. Ethan stepped inside and stopped. The room beyond was unlike anything he expected. His flashlight swept across the space. Rows of bookshelves lined the walls. A large desk stood near the center. Several chairs sat neatly arranged around a circular table. An antique clock rested against one wall. Heavy curtains covered narrow windows. Most astonishing of all, the room seemed untouched by time. The rest of the mansion showed clear signs of decay. Dust, moisture, neglect, but this room appeared preserved, almost protected. A thin layer of dust covered certain surfaces, yet everything remained remarkably intact. It was as if someone had locked the room and simply walked away. Ethan slowly entered. His footsteps sounded strangely loud. The hidden room felt different from the rest of the house. Not frightening, just watchful, as though it remembered every person who had ever entered. He examined the bookshelves first. Most contained journals. Dozens of them, perhaps hundreds, each bound in leather, each carefully labeled with dates. His pulse quickened. Whoever built this room had documented something for many years. He removed one journal and opened it carefully. The pages were filled with elegant handwriting. The first entry was dated more than a century earlier. Ethan carried the journal to the desk. The name written inside immediately caught his attention. Jonathan Blackwood, the mansion's original owner. Ethan had seen the name in old property records. According to local history, Blackwood had been one of Ashcroft's wealthiest residents during the late 19th century. Yet, little else was known about him. Now, Ethan was holding his personal journal. He began reading. Hours seemed to disappear. The entries described construction projects, local events, and observations about life in Ashcroft. But as the years progressed, the tone changed. Blackwood became increasingly secretive. His writings mentioned discoveries, hidden locations, meetings conducted in private, warnings he dared not explain. Again and again, one phrase appeared. Some truths are safer hidden until the right person finds them. Ethan frowned. The statement appeared throughout multiple journals, almost like a message intended for a future reader. As midnight approached, he continued examining the room. The carved symbols on the beams appeared repeatedly. He copied several into his notebook. Then, he turned his attention to the desk. Unlike the shelves, the desk contained loose papers, letters, maps, sketches, architectural drawings. Many appeared connected to Mansion itself. Others showed sections of Ashcroft. Certain locations had been circled in red ink. Ethan carefully unfolded one map. His eyes widened. Beneath the town appeared a network of hand-drawn tunnels. Dozens of them. The passages stretched beneath streets, buildings, and nearby hills. Some connected directly to the mansion. Others vanished into areas marked only with question marks. The discovery raised even more questions. Why had Blackwood mapped tunnels beneath the town? And why hide the information in a secret room? Ethan continued searching. Near the back of the desk sat a small metal box. Its dark surface reflected the flashlight's beam. A keyhole occupied the center. Locked, he searched the desk drawers. No key. He checked the shelves. Nothing. For now, the box would remain closed. Disappointed but intrigued, he returned to the journals. Several volumes near the end of the collection immediately stood out. Pages had been torn from them. Not one or two pages. Entire sections. Dozens. Someone had deliberately removed information. The missing pages appeared concentrated during the final years of Blackwood's life, exactly when his writings became most mysterious. Ethan felt frustration building. The missing sections might contain the answers he needed. Instead, they left only fragments, clues without explanations. Near 2 o'clock in the morning, exhaustion began creeping into his thoughts. He leaned back in the chair. His flashlight rested beside him. The hidden room remained silent. Then something caught his attention. A partially open drawer at the bottom of the desk. He was certain it had been closed earlier. Perhaps he had overlooked it. Curious, he knelt beside the desk and pulled it open. Inside lay only a few objects. A fountain pen, a folded handkerchief, and a photograph. Ethan picked it up. At first, he didn't understand what he was seeing. Then his stomach tightened. The photograph showed the hidden room. This very room. The desk. The shelves. The curtains. Everything. But that wasn't what disturbed him. The photograph wasn't old. The paper quality was modern. The image itself looked recent. Maybe only a few years old. Standing beside the desk was a woman. She appeared to be in her 30s or 40s. Dark coat. Serious expression. One hand resting on the very chair where Ethan now sat. He stared at the picture. A cold feeling settled in his chest. This room had not been forgotten. Someone else knew about it. Someone had been here recently. He turned the photograph over. A single sentence had been written neatly on the back. The room is never empty. For a moment, Ethan simply stared. Then a sudden realization struck him. The dust covering the room wasn't uniform. Earlier, he had assumed years of neglect explained everything. Now he looked more carefully. Certain areas showed subtle disturbances. The floor near the desk, a section beside the shelves. Tiny signs of movement, signs he had overlooked. Someone had indeed visited this place. Maybe recently, maybe very recently. A chill ran down his spine. The hidden room suddenly felt much smaller, much less abandoned. Slowly, Ethan looked around the silent chamber. The shelves, the journals, the lockbox, the strange symbols, and now the photograph. Every discovery seemed connected to something larger, something waiting beneath the surface. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the mansion's walls, another person knew the secret existed, and judging by the message left behind, they might know Ethan had found it. Holding the photograph tightly, he stared into the shadows at the far end of the room. For the first time since entering, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just stepped into a mystery that was far from over. The photograph stayed on Ethan's mind long after he left the hidden room. As dawn approached, he locked the secret chamber behind him and returned to his bedroom, yet sleep refused to come. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the woman standing beside the desk. The room is never empty. The message replayed endlessly in his thoughts. Who was she? Why had she been inside the room? And more importantly, how many others knew about it? The next morning, Ethan stood at the kitchen counter with a cup of coffee growing cold in his hands. Sunlight filtered through the dusty windows of the mansion, but it did little to ease his unease. He needed answers, and those answers weren't going to be found by sitting in the house. By noon, he drove into Ashcroft. The town looked peaceful enough. Small shops lined Main Street. People greeted one another by name. Children rode bicycles along the sidewalks. It was hard to imagine secrets hiding beneath such an ordinary place. His first stop was the town library. The elderly librarian, Mrs. Hargrove, recognized him immediately. "You're the new owner of the Blackwood house." Ethan smiled. "I guess word travels fast." In Ashcroft, everything travels fast. She lowered her reading glasses. "Except the things people don't want discussed." The remark immediately caught his attention. For the next 2 hours, Ethan searched through local archives, newspapers, property records, historical documents. Most references to Jonathan Blackwood painted him as a wealthy businessman and philanthropist, but scattered among the articles were odd details. Several stories mentioned Blackwood funding private excavation projects around town. Another article described disputes involving land ownership. One particularly old newspaper referred to a mysterious incident that had occurred more than a century earlier. Unfortunately, much of the article had been damaged. Only a few lines remained readable. Several local officials deny rumors regarding underground activity. Witnesses report unusual disturbances. Mr. Blackwood refuses public comment. The rest was missing. Ethan copied everything he could find. Before leaving, he approached Mrs. Hargrove. "Have you ever heard anything about tunnels beneath Ashcroft?" The librarian's expression changed immediately. Not fear, recognition. "You've been reading Blackwood's records." Ethan froze. "How do you know that?" Mrs. Hargrove glanced around to ensure nobody was listening. Then she spoke quietly. "Because everyone who discovers his writings eventually asks the same question." Ethan leaned closer. "There really are tunnels?" She hesitated. "My grandfather used to talk about them." "What did he say?" "That some places are hidden because people want them hidden." "Who?" The librarian slowly shook her head. "I don't know." She paused. "But there was always one name connected to the stories." "Jonathan Blackwood?" "No." Her eyes narrowed. "The Hollow Circle." Ethan frowned. "I've never heard of that." "Neither has anyone else." The librarian gathered several books and changed the subject. The conversation was clearly over, yet the mysterious phrase lingered in Ethan's mind. The Hollow Circle. Another clue, another mystery. By evening, Ethan had accumulated pages of notes. Most led nowhere, but one discovery stood out. An old town survey from decades earlier showed unusual gaps beneath several sections of Ashcroft, areas where underground structures had once existed. The locations matched portions of Blackwood's tunnel map. That couldn't be coincidence. Returning to the mansion, Ethan spread the documents across the hidden room's desk. Hours passed as he compared records. Slowly, a pattern emerged. Blackwood hadn't merely been mapping tunnels. He had been tracking something, or someone. His journals repeatedly referenced meetings held beneath the town, conversations conducted in secret, warnings about evidence that needed protection. Then Ethan found a journal entry that made his pulse quicken. The entrance remained secure beneath the cellar. "Should anything happen to me, the path must remain hidden until the proper guardian arrives." Ethan read the sentence 3 times. Beneath the cellar. He immediately grabbed his flashlight. The mansion cellar sat below the kitchen. The stone staircase creaked beneath his weight as he descended. The air grew cooler, damp, silent. Rows of old shelves lined the walls. Broken furniture occupied one corner. Nothing appeared unusual at first, but now Ethan examined every inch carefully. Nearly an hour passed before he noticed something. One section of the floor looked slightly different. The stones were older, less worn, as if they had been removed and replaced at some point. Kneeling, he brushed away dirt and debris. A metal ring emerged from beneath the dust. His heart raced. He pulled. At first, the stone slab resisted. Then it shifted. With considerable effort, Ethan dragged it aside. A dark opening appeared beneath. Cold air rushed upward, much colder than the cellar itself. He aimed his flashlight downward. Stone steps descended into darkness. The tunnel, Blackwood's tunnel. For several moments, Ethan simply stared. Every sensible instinct urged him to close the entrance and walk away. But curiosity had brought him this far, and curiosity was stronger. Taking a deep breath, he began descending. The staircase stretched deeper than expected. The sounds of the house gradually disappeared. Soon only silence remained. The tunnel at the bottom was surprisingly large. Stone walls curved overhead. The passage continued in both directions. Ethan checked Blackwood's map. According to the drawings, the eastern route connected to several chambers beneath town. The western route ended abruptly. He chose east. The beam of his flashlight danced across ancient stone. Water dripped somewhere in the distance. The deeper he ventured, the more unreal everything felt. This hidden world had existed beneath Ashcroft for generations, yet almost nobody knew it was there. Or perhaps some people did. The thought brought the photograph back to mind. The woman. Someone else had been exploring these passages, possibly searching for the same answers. After 20 minutes of walking, Ethan noticed something on the ground. He stopped. Footprints. Fresh footprints. Not ancient, not decades old. Recent, very recent. The dust around them had barely settled. His pulse quickened. Someone had passed through here not long ago, perhaps earlier that day. He followed the trail cautiously. The tunnel twisted through darkness. The footprints remained visible. Occasionally, they disappeared over stone before reappearing in dusty sections farther ahead. Whoever made them knew exactly where they were going. Ethan continued. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. 15. Then he rounded a corner. The tunnel widened slightly. His flashlight swept across the floor. More footprints. But this time something felt wrong. He wasn't looking at one trail. He was looking at two. One set moved away from him. The other, his stomach tightened. The second set appeared fresher, much fresher, and they weren't moving away. They were coming toward him. Ethan's breath caught. Someone else was inside the tunnels. At that exact moment, a faint sound echoed to the darkness ahead. A footstep. Then another. Slow, measured, deliberate. Ethan switched off his flashlight instantly. Darkness swallowed him. The footsteps continued. Closer now, closer than before. Somewhere ahead, another person was moving through the tunnels, and judging by the direction of those steps, they were heading straight toward him. Darkness pressed against Ethan from every side. He stood motionless in the tunnel, his flashlight switched off, listening to the approaching footsteps. Each step echoed softly through the underground passage. Closer, closer, closer. His heart hammered against his ribs. The air felt colder than before. For several tense moments, Ethan considered turning around and running back to the mansion. Every instinct told him he was unprepared for whatever or whoever was approaching. Then the footsteps stopped. Silence returned. A long silence, the kind that made every second feel stretched. Ethan swallowed nervously. Had the person heard him? Were they standing there in the darkness, listening just as carefully? Before he could decide what to do, a calm voice echoed through the tunnel. You can turn your flashlight back on. Ethan froze. The voice belonged to a woman, not threatening, not frightened, simply certain. You've been following the footprints for nearly half an hour, the voice continued. There's no point hiding now. After a brief hesitation, Ethan switched the flashlight back on. The beam cut through the darkness. About 20 feet ahead stood a woman wearing a dark coat. The photograph. It was her. The same woman from the hidden room. The same serious eyes. The same calm expression. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then the woman nodded. I was wondering when someone would finally find the room. Ethan tightened his grip on the flashlight. Who are you? My name is Eleanor Graves. The name meant nothing to him. You've been inside the hidden room. Many times. Ethan stared. You left the photograph. Yes. Why? Eleanor studied him carefully. Because I wanted to know who would find it. The answer only created more questions. The tunnel seemed strangely quiet as they faced one another. Finally, Ethan asked a question that had been bothering him for days. What is all this? Eleanor glanced down the passage. The answer is farther ahead. She turned and began walking. After a moment's hesitation, Ethan followed. The tunnels wound beneath the town like buried veins. As they walked, Eleanor explained little. She seemed cautious, as though deciding how much she could trust him. Eventually, the passage opened into a vast underground chamber. Ethan stopped in amazement. The room was enormous. Stone columns supported the ceiling. Ancient lantern brackets lined the walls. Dust-covered crates and shelves occupied several corners. The chamber felt less like a tunnel and more like a forgotten underground hall. Eleanor walked toward a large wooden table positioned near the center. Several old documents rested upon it. Maps, letters, journals, more evidence of Blackwood's secret work. This place was one of his meeting chambers, she said. Jonathan Blackwood? She nodded. For years, he investigated things that powerful people wanted forgotten. Ethan stepped closer. The journals mentioned something called the Hollow Circle. For the first time, Eleanor's expression changed. You found that name. So it was real? Very real. A heavy silence followed. Then Eleanor pulled out a chair and sat down. It wasn't a secret society the way people imagine. What was it then? A group of influential individuals who controlled land, money, and decisions throughout the region more than a century ago. Ethan listened carefully. They used their influence to acquire property from struggling families. Legally? On paper, yes. Her voice hardened. In reality, many records were altered. Agreements disappeared. Ownership histories were rewritten. Ethan frowned. And Blackwood discovered this? He discovered enough to become dangerous. Eleanor opened one of the journals. Several pages contained notes written in Blackwood's elegant handwriting. He spent years collecting evidence. Ethan looked around the underground chamber. That's why he built the hidden room. Exactly. The realization settled heavily in Ethan's mind. The secret room hadn't been created to hide treasure. It had been built to protect information, truth, history, things someone desperately wanted erased. But what happened to him? Ethan asked. Eleanor closed the journal. No one knows for certain. How is that possible? He vanished. The answer sent a chill through Ethan. Vanished. He was here one week and gone the next. The chamber fell silent. Somewhere deep within the tunnels, water dripped steadily. Eleanor stood. Come with me. They crossed the hall toward another passage concealed behind fallen stone. The corridor beyond appeared older than the others. More ancient. Its walls bore symbols identical to those carved inside the hidden room. Ethan immediately recognized them. I've seen those before. I know. You know, I've read every journal Blackwood left behind. Eleanor continued walking. My grandfather was the one who discovered most of them. Ethan's eyes widened. Your grandfather knew about all this? He became the next guardian. Guardian? Eleanor nodded. Someone had to protect the evidence. The word echoed in Ethan's thoughts. Guardian, not owner, not investigator. Protector. Suddenly the photograph made more sense. The hidden room had never been abandoned. Someone had always been watching over it, generation after generation. My grandfather passed the responsibility to me. They reached a massive stone door. Ethan stopped. The structure looked ancient, older than anything else he had seen underground. Its surface contained dozens of carved symbols. Several matched the markings in Blackwood's journals. What is this place? He asked. Eleanor stared at the door. The final vault. The vault? The location Blackwood spent years trying to secure. Ethan felt excitement rising again. What's inside? Eleanor smiled faintly. If Blackwood succeeded, the answers. For several moments, they examined the carvings. The symbols formed a puzzle, a sequence, a pattern. Fortunately, Blackwood's journals contained sketches of the arrangement. Using the notes, They carefully rotated several stone discs embedded in the door. One by one, hours seemed to pass. Finally, the last symbol aligned. A deep rumble shook the chamber. Dust cascaded from above. The ancient door slowly began to move. Ethan stepped back. The opening widened gradually. Cold air flowed outward. Neither spoke. This was the moment Blackwood had spent years preparing for. The moment generations of guardians had protected. The vault opened completely. Shelves filled the room beyond. Hundreds of boxes, thousands of documents, ledgers, property records, letters, maps, evidence, an entire hidden archive. For a moment, Ethan could only stare. The amount of preserved history was astonishing. Everything Blackwood had worked to protect appeared to be here. But then his attention shifted. Something sat alone upon a small wooden table positioned at the center of the vault. A single envelope. Nothing else. Just one envelope. Waiting. Eleanor noticed it too. Slowly they approached. Dust covered the table. Yet the envelope itself appeared untouched. Almost as if someone had placed it there yesterday. Ethan looked down. His breath caught. Written across the front in elegant handwriting were 4 words. To Ethan Carter. His mind went blank. The vault, the journals, the tunnels. None of it made sense anymore. Jonathan Blackwood had died more than a century ago. Yet somehow, impossibly, an envelope inside a hidden underground vault bore Ethan's name. Eleanor stared at it in stunned silence. "I don't understand," she whispered. Neither did Ethan. But as he reached toward the envelope, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. The mystery of the old house was far bigger than he had ever imagined, and the answers waiting inside that envelope were about to change everything. The underground vault was silent. Ethan stood motionless before the small wooden table, staring at the envelope. To Ethan Carter. The words seemed impossible. Jonathan Blackwood had lived more than a century ago. There was no way he could have known Ethan's name. No way he could have prepared a message for someone not yet born. And yet the evidence was right in front of him. Beside him, Eleanor looked equally stunned. "Open it," she said quietly. Ethan swallowed. With careful hands, he lifted the envelope. The paper felt old but surprisingly well preserved. For a brief moment, he hesitated. Then he broke the seal. Inside were several folded pages. The handwriting matched the journals. Jonathan Blackwood's. Ethan unfolded the first sheet and began to read. To the one who carries a Carter name. If this letter has reached you, then the path I prepared has survived. I do not know your first name, nor the year in which you stand. But I know your family. Without the help of Samuel Carter, none of this would have remained hidden. He was my friend, my ally, and the one man I trusted when trust became dangerous. Ethan's eyes widened. Samuel Carter, his great-great-grandfather. The name had appeared occasionally in old family stories, but little was known about him. Eleanor leaned closer as Ethan continued reading. When those who sought to bury the truth began destroying records, Samuel helped move the evidence. Together we concealed what could not be allowed to disappear. If you are reading this now, then the responsibility has passed to you. The documents within this vault belong not to any one person, but to the people whose histories were stolen. Return the truth to them. The letter ended with Blackwood's signature. For several moments, neither Ethan nor Eleanor spoke. The reality of the discovery slowly settled over them. The connection was real. Ethan's family had been involved from the very beginning. His ancestor had helped preserve the secret. And somehow, generation after generation, the trail had eventually led back to him. It wasn't an accident, Eleanor said softly. What wasn't? You finding the house. Ethan looked around the vault, the hidden room, the journals, the tunnels, the letter. For the first time, the pieces began fitting together. The old mansion had not simply fallen into his life by chance. Its history had been quietly waiting for someone willing to uncover it. Someone connected to the past. Someone who would continue what Blackwood and Samuel Carter had started. The discovery brought a strange feeling of responsibility, but it also brought a difficult question. What do we do now? Eleanor glanced at the shelves surrounding them. Exactly what Blackwood wanted. The following weeks became the busiest period of Ethan's life. Every day, He and Eleanor cataloged documents from a vault, thousands of pages, property records, signed agreements, maps, correspondence, financial ledgers, evidence that revealed how numerous families had lost land, businesses, and opportunities through manipulation and deception. The records painted a very different picture of Ashcroft history, one that had remained hidden for generations. As word slowly spread among historians and legal researchers, interest in the discoveries grew rapidly. People traveled from neighboring towns to examine the evidence. Experts verified documents. Archives confirmed signatures. Old records previously considered lost suddenly reappeared. The truth was impossible to ignore. Not everyone welcomed the revelations. Some influential individuals argued that the past should remain buried. Others worried that reopening old wounds would divide the community. Ethan understood those concerns. Yet every time he considered remaining silent, he remembered Blackwood's letter, returned the truth to them. The documents did not exist to create conflict. They existed to restore history, to acknowledge people whose stories had been erased. Months passed. Gradually, the evidence became public. Newspaper articles appeared throughout the region. Researchers published findings. Families learned details about ancestors they had never known. Several long-forgotten histories were finally recognized. The impact spread far beyond property disputes. People discovered acts of courage, sacrifice, kindness. Entire chapters of local history emerged from the shadows. The town began changing, not dramatically, not overnight, but steadily. For the first time, Ashcroft was confronting its past honestly, and in doing so, it found a stronger sense of identity. One autumn afternoon, nearly a year after purchasing the mansion, Ethan stood outside the house and admired the transformation. The restoration was almost complete. Fresh paint covered the exterior. The roof had been repaired. The gardens had returned to life. Sunlight reflected from newly restored windows. The mansion looked proud again, alive again. Many townspeople who once avoided the property now stopped to admire it. Children pointed at its towers. Visitors came to learn about its history. The house nobody wanted to become one of Ashcroft's most treasured landmarks. Inside, the hidden room remained exactly as it had been found. Ethan and Eleanor had agreed on that from the beginning. Nothing would be removed. Nothing would be altered. The room would stand as a reminder of everything it had protected. Late that evening, Ethan climbed the familiar staircase. The restored hallway glowed softly beneath warm lights. He stopped before the bookshelf, pressed the hidden mechanism, and listened to the familiar click. The bookshelf slid aside. The secret passage opened. A few moments later, he entered the hidden room. Everything looked peaceful. The shelves, the journals, the desk, the clock, the room that had started everything. Ethan walked slowly toward the window. Outside, the sun was setting behind Ashcroft. Golden light painted the town below. For a while, he simply stood there, thinking. A year earlier, he had been searching for a fresh start. Nothing more. He had expected an old house, a restoration project, perhaps a chance to rebuild his life. Instead, he had discovered something far greater. Purpose, friendship, community, a connection to history he never knew existed. Behind him, the door opened quietly. Eleanor entered carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to him. "You always end up here." Ethan smiled. "It's a good place to think." She looked around the room. "I think Blackwood would be happy." "Maybe." "And Samuel Carter." Ethan nodded. Maybe they would. Not because a secret had remained hidden, but because it had finally been revealed. The truth had survived, not through wealth, not through power, but through ordinary people willing to protect it. The two stood together in comfortable silence. Outside, evening settled over Ashcroft. Inside, the hidden room remained warm and quiet. No longer a mystery, no longer forgotten, just a part of history. A living reminder that some truths may be buried for a time, hidden behind walls and locked away in darkness. But eventually, if enough people care, they find their way back into the light. And as Ethan gazed across the town below, he knew one thing for certain. The greatest thing he had found in the $100 house was never the hidden room. It was a legacy waiting inside it.